Ron Locker. Next to him, we have Captain Travis Moss of the Tampa Police Department. Then we have Mike Ferguson, who's the Assistant Special Agent in charge with the Drug Enforcement Administration. We then have Kirk Howard, who's the Special Agent in charge with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. We're also joined by Chief of Staff of the State Attorney's Office, Gary Weissman, and then Colonel Chris Rule with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Each of these law enforcement agencies has done and continues to do an excellent job of protecting this community from threats posed by gangs and gang violence. My office is honored to partner with them to prosecute cases in federal court that will serve to protect this community. As the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Florida, I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for 35 counties in Florida. In this role, I've made combating violence a top priority of my office. As part of those efforts, I've increased the resources that my office has dedicated to the prosecution of violent criminals and gangs that operate in our community. The case that I'm here to talk about today is a great example of the excellent work that law enforcement is doing to protect this community from the dangers of gang violence. The criminal enterprise that was the focus of this investigation was known as the Alexander Park Gang, also known as AP. The gang was based in Hillsborough County. They named themselves after Alexander Park, a park about 5 miles from where we're standing right here, which was in the neighborhood where several members of the gang grew up. Christian Andujar Rivera was the leader of the gang. Members of the gang included 5 of the other defendants charged in this indictment: Irvin Diego Bruzon, Xavier Chase Gardner, Mohammed Nadil Jabbar, Julio Colazo, and Kyle Miller. As alleged in their federal indictment, these individuals conspired together and committed a wide range of criminal offenses: murder, burglaries, robberies, shootings, drug trafficking, fraud. The members of AP used murder and other acts of violence and intimidation to instill fear in this community and to retaliate against rival gang members. Some of those violent acts are known to the community, but their connections to one another may not be known, at least not yet. One of those violent acts occurred at Scores Gentlemen's Club. Scores is located on Dale Mabry, about 4 miles from where we are right now. On April 17th of 2022, a victim died of a fatal gunshot in the parking lot of that nightclub. Initial reports described the shooting as the result of an argument. In fact, it was an argument between members of rival gangs. It was a gang-related shooting. An associate of the Latin Kings shot and killed a member of AP during the shootout in the parking lot. One of AP's members was there, Mohammed Nadil Jabbar. He was present at the scene of the shooting. His car was impounded as evidence and searched because his vehicle was hit by gunfire during the shootout. As a result of that search, 2 firearms and a .40 caliber shell casing were found in his vehicle. And I want to ask you to pay particular attention to that shell casing because it's important. It's just one shell casing, but it turned out to be a critical piece of evidence in this case. Because the shooting that occurred on April 17th of 2022 was not the end of the violence. To the contrary, that shooting led to retaliation. 6 days after the shooting at Scores nightclub, members of AP retaliated. They retaliated by murdering a member of the Latin Kings. This murder happened in broad daylight in a strip mall parking lot on West Hillsborough Avenue. Video surveillance recorded the murder. A Jeep Grand Cherokee pulled up to the victim's car. An individual dressed all in black, wearing a mask and gloves, got out, looked inside the passenger window of the victim's car, and began shooting. 2 other individuals, also dressed in black with masks and gloves and firearms, then exited the Grand Cherokee and began shooting at the victim's car. The victim was shot 17 times. After killing the victim, members of AP attempted to destroy evidence by committing arson. The Grand Cherokee that was used in the shooting was driven to Pasco County, where it was set on fire. The law enforcement response by the agencies you see before you, it was immediate. The investigators on this case are thorough and meticulous, and they follow up on each and every lead. In processing the murder scene, investigators discovered approximately 70 shell casings in the parking lot where the murder took place. Those shell casings are important because investigators processed them using ATF's NIBIN program. NIBIN stands for the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. It is technology that helps to solve cases, and that is what happened here. A submission of one of the shell casings from the murder on April 23, 2022 resulted in a match with that .40 caliber shell casing that was found in Jabbar's car on April 17th, 6 days earlier. This lead was important because it helped propel this investigation forward because it connected what happened on April 17th with the retaliation that occurred on April 23rd. It is with that same zeal, focus, and attention to detail that these investigators worked on this investigation. Part of the initial response was identifying possible charges for immediate federal prosecution. In September 2022, Andujar Rivera and Jabbar were charged in separate federal indictments for possessing firearms after being previously convicted of a felony. But the investigators did not stop there. The goal of this investigation has always been the dismantlement of the AP gang. To do that, the agencies had to conduct a comprehensive investigation that would seek to hold the members of AP accountable for the full scope of their criminal acts. And their criminal enterprise was vast. The agencies on the case discovered that members of AP had built an expansive enterprise that operated in Florida, outside of Florida, for several years for the purpose of generating money and status for its members. The members of AP did this by committing crimes. Those crimes included murder, shootings, burglaries, robberies, and fraud. This pattern of racketeering activity was so extensive that the indictment in this case takes 39 pages to set out the 12 counts and 32 separate overt acts that are charged as part of the conspiracy in this case. As alleged in that indictment and other court documents, the members of AP engaged in crimes that were connected to one another. Let me explain. Members of AP trafficked in marijuana, lots of it, totaling thousands of pounds. The members of AP obtained some of that marijuana they trafficked by committing other crimes, in particular by stealing marijuana or robbing it from others. The indictment sets out 6 different occasions in 4 different states where those burglaries, robberies, and attempted robberies of marijuana are alleged to have taken place. They include the burglary of a warehouse in Oregon that resulted in the stealing of 300 pounds of marijuana, a robbery of a residence in California in the stealing of 100 pounds of marijuana, a burglary of a residence in Florida in the stealing of marijuana, a burglary of a residence in Florida in the stealing of marijuana and U.S. currency, an armed robbery of another residence in Florida in the stealing of marijuana, U.S. currency, and jewelry, an armed robbery of a victim in Michigan for the purpose of stealing marijuana and U.S. currency. Make no mistake about it, these burglaries and robberies were planned. Victims were stalked. The indictment identifies 5 victims who were stalked and 1 who was abducted by members of AP as part of their plan to attempt to rob and kill those victims, or kill those victims. To assist in those efforts, members of AP turned to technology. We all have GPS trackers on our phones. Well, what some of the members of AP did was they purchased GPS trackers and they placed them on vehicles belonging to the victims or those close to them. For example, in July 2021, a rival gang member of AP was shot and almost killed here in Tampa. Investigators found that a GPS tracker paid for by an AP member had been placed on that victim's car prior to the attempted murder. In January 2022, 2 victims had approximately $50,000 worth of merchandise and marijuana stolen from their business in South Florida. 2 trackers paid for by an AP member were discovered on the vehicles of those victims. The drugs that were obtained from those burglaries and robberies were often distributed here in this community. Thousands of pounds of marijuana, some of which was obtained through the violent acts that I've described. The members of AP did not limit themselves to violence and drug trafficking. They also engaged in fraud. On 4 occasions, members of AP provided false information to financial institutions to obtain vehicles, but not any longer. Through the excellent work of the agencies on this case, a federal grand jury has returned an indictment charging 6 members of AP with a racketeering conspiracy and various related charges, including conspiracy to commit robbery, bank fraud, arson, murder in aid of racketeering, and possession with intent to distribute 1,000 kilograms or more of marijuana. The allegations that are set out in that indictment and in other court documents, which I've summarized here today, well, they're just that, they're allegations. And each of the defendants in this case, Andujar Rivera, Brazone, Gardner, Jabbar, Collazo, and Miller, are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. These are serious charges that are pending here in federal court in Tampa. Each of the defendants faces a minimum mandatory of 10 years in federal prison, up to life. I want to commend the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, the Tampa Police Department, ATF, DEA, and IRS for their tremendous effort and years of tireless investigation. I also want to thank the State Attorney's Office for their partnership on this investigation. This case is a great example of how local, state, and federal investigators are able to effectively work together to protect our community by prosecuting those who seek to harm our community through violence. Our agencies are united in this mission. We are committed to using every lawful tool to dismantle violent gangs that operate in this community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Special Agent in Charge, Kirk Howard.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kirk Howard, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Special Agent in Charge of the ATF Tampa Field Division. I am proud to join the U.S. Attorney Handburg and the other law enforcement officials here this morning. Today's announcement is a sneak peek into the complex story about the Alexander Park Gang, a sophisticated, well-financed, and ruthless enterprise that until recently fueled violent crimes and terrorized communities across the United States for sheer profit. The group's pattern of activities spanned from March of 2020 to October of 2023 and included armed drug trafficking, targeted shootings, armed home invasions, arson, murder, bank fraud, and firearms possession crimes. Fortunately, this type of case falls directly in line with ATF's mission. We find and arrest the worst criminals, the trigger pullers, the drug dealers, like the Alexander Park Gang. We began investigating Alexander Park Gang in 2021 and have been to all corners of this country, from Puerto Rico to Tampa to California, where we recently arrested Mohammed Jabbar. From day one, ATF set out to achieve 3 objectives. First and foremost was the public safety, including the individuals that the Alexander Park Gang may have been targeting. We identified the group's hierarchy and prioritized criminal charges against its leaders. We also deconstructed the enterprise's pattern of activities to obtain criminal charges in this federal indictment. I won't reveal the operational details for this case because it's still active, but I'd like to share a little bit about crime gun intelligence. As we spoke earlier, NIBIN, or the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, helped generate investigative leads by digitally analyzing and comparing spent shell casings from seemingly unrelated crime scenes. The investigators utilized E-Trace, which is a tool that helped investigators quickly identify where the firearms were manufactured at and who the initial purchaser was, and how they may have ended up in this particular crime. We also have access to Touch DNA, a powerful forensic tool that analyzes trace samples of biological material left on evidence, like firearms, ammunition, or clothing, after being just handled casually. And most important, the biggest capability and resource we had were the ruthless determination of the men and women of our partners, the Tampa Police Department, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigations, and of course, our state and federal prosecutors. The Alexander Park Gang's leadership team, the defendants named this morning, are in custody, and they face serious charges that come with serious consequences. It's too early to tell if they will face additional charges or if there'll be additional conspirators, but we can say this. The Alexander Park Gang is no longer in business. The main players will face justice they deserve, and the public is much safer today with them in jail. And with that, I'll transition back to Mr. Handburg.
Thank you, Special Agent in Charge Howard. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any other members of this enterprise AP still out there, you think?
There are other members, but we think we have dismantled this organization. And so one of the things that we always do in these cases, and I can tell you from working with these investigators, they are, as you heard, ruthless, and they are going to follow up using every lawful tool in their toolbox on every lead to seek to hold accountable everyone that we can as a result of this violent group. So sometimes a federal indictment in the case is the end of the charge. Sometimes it's a continuation of the investigation, and future charges are possible. And so I would say that there should be a message to anyone who is involved in any aspect of this racketeering enterprise. I don't feel like our work is over. These agents are going to continue to follow up on each and every lead, and we'll see where that takes us as this case proceeds forward. Yes.
Can you clarify the nationalities of each of the members? Do you have that?
I don't. We will have someone who will provide that to you. I don't have that on my. Yes, sir.
What kind of terror were these people causing on their community? Not obviously communities across the country, but the community right here in Hillsborough County.
Well, these type of retaliatory shootings, we've seen them so many times before, and they put the people who are shooting at each other in danger, and they put the other people in the community in danger as well. And so what our job is, and what the focus of these investigators has been to both disrupt these organizations, and we do that working with the state attorney's office to find immediate charges that we can bring. But it's really through the dismantlement of these organizations that we can provide long-term reductions in crime to really keep our community safe. But it's, these incidents can be terrifying. I'm talking about a murder that happened, in a parking lot, not too far from where we're standing here today. And that was in retaliation for a shooting that happened in a nightclub. And so what our goal is to try to do what we can to stop the violence so we can protect the members of our community. We can protect the people who are engaged in these crimes from killing each other, and also to protect the members of the community so they're not hit as a result of the gunfire that sometimes results from this gang-related violence.
How many murders are they suspected of committing?
So we've charged the one murder in the RICO indictment that we've charged, and so that's the one that I'm prepared to talk about today. But you'll see in that proposed indictment, there's other attempts to solicit murders, and in some of the court documents, you'll see that there are efforts to track victims to be able to commit murders. I mean, one of the victims in this case was shot twice. So these are often long-running feuds or grievances that these different gangs have with each other that result in this violence.
I believe one of these suspects was connected to a possible kidnapping attempt or something along those lines up in Detroit. Is that part of this investigation?
So I referenced that the robberies occurred in 4 different states, so that is related to this investigation. So some of these defendants are facing charges in other jurisdictions. There was a charge against, I think it's Bruzone, that was in the Southern District of Florida. And then we have 2 individuals who are facing charges up in Michigan. And when you have a multi-jurisdictional enterprise like this one that commits crimes in multiple jurisdictions, what I can tell you is, as prosecutors and investigative agencies, we are then going to seek to prosecute those crimes multi-jurisdictionally. And that's what's happened in this case, is there's prosecutors in other parts of this state and in other parts of this country that are pursuing charges, but those are related to the charges in this case. And what the purpose of this RICO indictment is, and the RICO indictments are really comprehensive documents. I mean, I talked about 39 pages, 12 counts, 32 different overt acts. What they're intended to do is to put everything in context, to show that these aren't isolated incidents. It's not just a robbery in Michigan. It's not just a robbery in the Southern District of Florida. These are all connected together through this organization, which is using that violence in an effort to try to, in this case, get money for the members of the organization and also to get status to advance the cause of this enterprise. So that's what the goal of our prosecution is to dismantle this enterprise, and part of that is tying all of these what might appear to be unrelated events together to show their relationship, and the relationship is through the defendants who are being prosecuted here in federal court.
And sir, what is the incident that put this gang on your all's radar back in 2021?
I don't know the exact incident in this case that led to it, but what I can tell you is that the investigative agencies on this case, and I can tell you this from being a federal prosecutor for over 21 years, they know their community. They know who the gang members are. They know who those who are engaged in this type of violence. And one of the things they do is they're proactive. And they're proactive at identifying problems in our community and trying to find comprehensive solutions through the investigation, to deal with them. And I would just give that as a message to anyone who's involved in a gang here in Tampa is the investigative agencies on this case are meticulous. They have long memories, and they're going to continue to do everything that they can using their lawful tools to keep this community safe. And sometimes that might result in an immediate arrest, and sometimes that might result in a case that has to get developed over the course of several years. But I commend them for their perseverance and their excellent work on this case. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
You don't want to hold on to that the whole time?